And now, from the Marquee Media Studio inside Mark Tank, it's the Mark Haney Show.
Yes, it's the Mark Haney Show on a mission to ignite the entrepreneurial revolution right here in the hometown we love. And today's show is, I think you're going to like it because this is going to be the story of a guy who starts out in a business development role. Edris Bemanian starts out as a business development person for a startup and ultimately becomes the CEO, and he's the CEO of Engage3. It's a true comeback story within the company, but it's also a story of a guy that took this opportunity to just go out and prove himself and get promoted to the CEO of the company because he's the right guy for the job. So today, Edris is going to share the story of Engage3 and really the story of how to win in the startup world today, because Engage3 is killing it. So stick around and hear the story of Engage3. I think you're going to love Edris. He is a gem for the Sacramento community. Stick around. And today I am joined by Edris Bemanian. He is the CEO of Engage3. They are a local startup that is growing pretty rapidly. And we're going to hear the story about how Edris came on and started in business development, but now is the CEO. So we'll learn about this exciting company that's being built right here in Sacramento. So welcome to the show, Edris.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So you went to UC Davis, you left, came back in this role. Give me this story of how you became the CEO.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Our founders are actually a bit of local legends in a sense, in my view anyways. They actually founded their first company. I'll come back to my story. Mm-hmm. They founded their first company in the 90s, and they founded it out of Sacramento in their garage. It was a company called Chimetrics.
Okay.
And Chimetrics was the first retail price optimization company that existed. And so they basically went and saw, hey, this is how retail pricing is done. We see it's more of an art than a science. We think it should be more of a balance between the two. And so they brought in, our founder was doing his PhD work in theoretical physics and realized I can apply a lot of these concepts to retail pricing. So he and his brother had a pretty big pool business in Sacramento as well. His brother sold the pool business. He and Tim and Ken, they came together, they founded this company. They had some good initial traction, but when they were trying to raise money, what they were told was, we're not going to invest money in you because you're in Sacramento. If you move to the Bay Area or to Scottsdale or some other markets, we'll put money into you.
Wow, that's what the venture capitalists said to them.
In the 90s.
In the 90s, okay. Gotcha.
In the 90s. Okay. And so there was actually an article that came out. It was either in the SACB or the Davis Enterprise, but I think it was SACB, and it said the price of success in Sacramento is having to leave. And so it was very unfortunate, right? But they left. They moved the company to Scottsdale, Arizona. They take the venture capital and they grew the company from there, kept growing it. They were, Inc.'s fastest growing company several years in a row. Then they got acquired by SAP in 2006.
Nice.
And so after that, because our founder, Ken, his undergraduate degree was from UC Davis, he actually came back and started our company and headquartered it in Davis.
Okay. And then I want to get into what the business does, but we started off talking about how do you get in? What are you doing here?
Great point. I love that story so much.
Yeah, it is a great story.
And then, now you look at where Sacramento was to where it is now, which hopefully we'll get to, but from an entrepreneurship perspective. But for me, I went to UC Davis as well. I'd done some work with the, various programs. Even though I only did my undergraduate there, I was working with the MBA program. There's a gentleman who was leading the MBA program and the entrepreneurship side of it at the time is Andrew Hargadon. Mm-hmm. Shout out to Andy if he listens. I'm sure he does. And I told him, hey, you know what I'm good at? You know what I'm not good at? If you know of any companies around here, I'm not looking for a full-time job right now, but I'm interested in consulting different companies. So he introduced me to 10, 15 different startups. And I met Ken on a Sunday, walked up, as we referenced them, the old creaky stairs to the office in downtown Davis. And I saw, a guy with just his socks on running around, looking like a mad scientist. And I walked in and sat down with him, and he immediately started whiteboarding optimization problems and walking me through all of the wasted opportunity in terms of dollars in the retail promotion space and how we can actually align those dollars to actually deliver them to customers in a way that customers would appreciate it. Tailoring them to whether you care about health attributes or sustainability causes or other things. And I was enraptured. I fell in love. And even though I had said, I'm not looking for a full-time job, I'm just looking for a consulting job, I joined full-time the next day, and I've been there ever since.
That says a lot about the opportunity. So you started off in business development, you eventually became CEO. Let's come back to this. I want to make sure we understand what that progression looked like. But you touched on the business model, the problem you're solving. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. Today, what we do is we help retailers and brands drive store trips by measuring their price image. And so we are able to help them actually drive traffic in a profitable way while helping them build loyalty with their customers. So you can think about us as an end-to-end pricing platform. We help our customers, who are, again, the retailers and brands, understand who their competitors are, where they're competing with them, how that varies across different markets. We then help them measure what's your price perception. So, as an example, there's some retailers who have a bad price perception, but in reality, they might only be priced a couple percentage points above the market, but they're perceived to be priced, let's say, 10% above the market.
Okay, let me just so we can slow it down for me a little bit. Let me imagine myself as a retailer. Yeah. Let's say I'm a grocery store. Is that a fair example?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm a grocery store, and I want to grow my business, but I got to price it low enough where people will buy it. But I want to optimize it so I can make some money. Yeah. And yet I want to keep long-term customers.
Exactly.
Am I on track?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly
just trying to, I'm slowing it down for our audience and me, but okay. So how do you do it?
Yeah. We collect 80 billion data points a month, and it's prices across the world.
Where do you collect it from? How do you collect the data points?
In-store data. We're kind of like the Uber for retail pricing, where we have people go into the stores and collect data using our mobile applications.
Okay.
But they're professionals doing that work. We also have web scraping capabilities. So we're going out there. We have programs and systems that run and capture all the data and that's available online. We bring it together. So that's how you get to that 80 billion data points. That's a lot of data, and it's not always structured and sorted. In fact, it's quite messy. So then we put a lot of effort through our product to go and enrich it, normalize it, attribute it, and basically take you as a grocer. We'll take your grocery store.
Now, let's say I've got ketchup and I don't know where to price my ketchup. Is that because it's not across the board? Ketchup's going to have a different margin than, say, meat, right? Okay.
Yeah. Take ketchup. You're going to have multiple types of ketchup. Most retailers will have anywhere from 5 to 10 spots just for ketchup, right, on their aisles. And so we'll take those ketchup items. We'll find the appropriate equivalents at your competitor's site. We'll link them together so you can say, here's your price, here's your competitor's price. Here are the differences in size. Here, this one is actually non-GMO. This one is organic. This one is whatever, right? And we'll go and understand the differences that those attributes have on prices. And we'll then ultimately say, hey, if you lower the price on this ketchup item by X%, you're actually going to see a Y% improvement in traffic. And it's like, wow, that's an outsized impact. Like, I should absolutely do that. And so, we help them manage that across their total assortment, and it's all tied together. What does the effect of lowering your price on ketchup have to do on your pickle prices? How does that influence your milk prices, maybe, if it does at all, right? So
how does it? How does that? Because I'm thinking pickle price and ketchup price and milk price, where's the correlation, causation for what you should price the other things for?
Yeah.
Is that art or is that science?
It's both.
Okay.
And so this is an interesting stat that every time I say it, I'm still surprised by it. Every consumer really has 5 products and prices that they pay attention to. And so if you figure out what those 5 prices are for different segments of customers, and if you price those right, you're establishing your value with them. And so as an example, if we go and we find out that Mark actually, is a frequent buyer of the fresh aisle and produce, and if we identify that you're within a customer segment that really values being taken care of in produce, then we can go figure out which produce items, if we price them right, will make you feel good and make you say, like, you know what, I'm being treated fairly and I'm going to buy more products with the store as well. So we go and we figure all that out.
So if you look at my buying habits, so you see some of my good habits and my bad habits, what I buy at the store, and then kind of create a customer persona for me.
Yeah.
And then you price the ketchup in something going, that's kind of like a second. Mark never buys ketchup, so we can price it higher for him.
You could do it that way. Well, you could say, I'm actually not even going to try to make an offer to win Mark's business on ketchup because he'll never purchase from me.
Okay, so it's not necessarily geared toward what the everyday pricing is. It's the specials and the marketing effort.
It's all of it. So you start with the base price and what's the price available to everybody and how do you manage that? And then you go and say, well, great. So what are the promotions that I should drive and implement that actually return an ROI? Another statistic that blows my mind away is that 75% of those trade promotions, those marketing initiatives actually failed to deliver positive ROI. And that's the big opportunity that when our founder was whiteboarding, the business model for me, that really got me excited, because it's like, hey, if you can take that massive inefficiency, because there's $100 billion spent there alone in the US every year. If you can take that and you can reorient that through analytics, data science, and tailor it to what customers actually care about and want, then you can drive a better outcome for the retailer, the manufacturer, and the consumer.
So now I'm thinking, like, how do you prove it, right?
Yeah.
So I could see the whiteboard, you could hypothesize on this, but if we took this grocery store customer, does he or she see his margin just go up, or do you compare it, hey, store A and store B? How do you actually, prove it to me so I run it throughout my entire chain of companies, chain of stores?
Yeah. Retailers are very sophisticated, so they have a high bar on looking for that kind of ROI. We're now serving 7 of the top 10 largest retailers in the world. And we're working with 9 of the top 10 convenience retailers in the US. And what they look to us and how they measure us is they look to see what is the difference in store traffic, right? Am I driving more traffic? Am I driving it more profitably? What is my visibility to my competition? So there's about 8 different metrics that we're measured on. And so we've got great use cases against those, and we just continuously measure that for our customers.
And from a store traffic standpoint, the base price doesn't seem like it would affect store traffic in a short-term way. It could change my prices 10%, 5 or 10%. I'm just throwing this out there.
Sure.
And, it's going to take a time to change behaviors. I got this habit of going to the convenience store all the time, but eventually I'm like, hey, these guys are, kind of more expensive. It's not priced the way I want it. Maybe I'll shift to the convenience store across the street. It's not going to happen in a day. So I have to imagine proving out the model or the use case to a convenience store might take time. And how long does it take for someone to fall in love with it?
You're hitting an awesome question, because it's how long does it take to change someone's perception and their buying patterns? So I'll take you on it, if you don't mind. I'll take you on a little bit of a journey.
It's really intriguing to me because I've been a retailer and I deal with that a little bit, but in a small way.
No, I would love to talk about it. So what a lot of the first generation price optimization companies did was they would go and they would take all the data and they would understand the current prices, and they'd start raising prices. They'd say, the word is elastic. How elastic are these different prices? So if I raise prices, how likely are they to, buy less of that product? And they go look for products where they could raise prices based on that measure. And so they'd raise prices and customers would go and still buy the product. And they're like, great, that's a positive reinforcement loop. Let me go raise prices again. And then maybe customers would buy it again. But what they're not picking up on is, maybe that customer bought it because they're at the shelf and it just hit them how big that, price tag was in aggregate. But that means that they've already now changed their perception in their mind. And just because they bought it this time doesn't mean they're going to buy it again. So they would continue to raise prices and start burning customer loyalty and perception. And so that is why a lot of retailers and brands stopped adopting these types of solutions in the early 2000s and the mid 2000s. And now there's a resurgence in demand for these types of solutions, but not the way that they were done previously, but a different way, which is how do I actually now take that model where I can go and manage my portfolio and manage to a long-term strategy? Because all the previous solutions were just raising prices and were very short-term profit oriented. We recognize, and the retailers recognize, that I have to go manage this and build loyalty over time. So to your point, having one bad price actually can wipe out the gains of 10 good prices, both in terms of perception as well as in terms of the unit economics. So it's very critical to figure out, if I am going to raise prices, where am I doing it and where are my customers okay with it? And then how do I offset that to improve my price perception or maintain my price perception? And that's what we manage.
And do you identify, with the retailer's help, who the ideal customer is? So if it's a convenience store, one kind of buyer is maybe the person that lives in the neighborhood and picks up stuff there all the time, and then the other time it might be somebody who shops at goes into, I'm just pick a name, a convenience store that's got a gas station associated with it, and they're on their way to the Bay Area or somewhere else. So they're not really a loyal customer necessarily. Or are they loyal to that brand? Let's say it's AMPM. I always shop at AMPM because I got my AMPM credit card.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of how you get all this data and turn it into an answer.
Your questions are really good. By the way, I really like them. So one example is you've got different types of retailers. Some are convenience retailers, right? Some are high-low retailers where they'll set high prices and then promote them to get to a low price. You have everyday low price retailers. You've got different types of retailers. Then within that, each retailer has different systems and different levels of complexity they can support. So one example is, some of them are ready to go and say, I want to send a targeted offer to Mark. But most retailers aren't quite there. And so they might say, okay, I have 20 segments of customers. I've got my Chef Gordon's, I've got my, Shopper Sam's, right? And they'll go and create these different customer profiles, and they'll start trying to deliver offers to people within these buckets. Then you have other retailers who have no capabilities to do any kind of targeting whatsoever. Our vision is that ultimately in the long run, all pricing will go to be personalized, where there'll always be a shelf price for everybody, but you'll have different discounts and promotions for different people, but we're not quite there yet. So we as in the industry, I guess. And so to come back to your question, like how do we take all this data and get to a price? It really depends on a lot of factors. We take into consideration what's the competitive price? What are your competitors doing? What are your costs and what margin might you get for this price? What is your customer loyalty and local demand to that product or that brand or your store? What's the weather? What's the psychological perception of the pricing? What's the store appearance, right? We take any of those inputs that we can get, and those will all ultimately help inform the pricing decisions.
Wow, that's really interesting. Okay, so I know we're going in deep on this product, which I usually don't do, but it's just really intriguing to me how you can make good decisions this way versus, just looking at a spreadsheet or something. I don't know. I guess people are doing it very, very manual. They don't have a system like yours, and maybe a lot of gut feeling and a little bit of customer feedback here or there. Okay, so let's talk about your product is where it's at now, and you've obviously got a lot of traction with the majors. Where do you see the company going from a business standpoint, but also how do you see the product developing?
Yeah, we acquired a company last year, and that company had great global reach. They're actually based largely in Europe. And so that has led to us being very aggressive in our global expansion. Previously, we were, in a handful of countries, and now we have customers across 180 countries. And so what we're planning to do is continue to expand both in terms of the capabilities that we have available in those different countries, as well as just going deeper within, the market share of each of those respective areas. We've been expanded. Last month, we announced the launch of a new solution, which was tailored just for brands specifically. And to help them with some of their use cases, because they have some different use cases and different levels of control they can exert on pricing. So we went and are now solving for that. Longer term, where we want to go is we want to take all of this data that we've built, all of the product links we've established, and help us get to a point where we're helping retailers and brands personalize their pricing and to actually go after that massive promotion opportunity I was describing. So, I'm studied environmental policy and analysis and planning at UC Davis, and one of the things that really resonated with me when I met our founder was, I try to look for items that have sustainability claims with them. And the point of the business model we have here is that we want to help our retailers and our brands understand, hey, Ed cares about those. So let me go and create a personalized offer or some messaging around how he can access that offer for that product, so he can feel like he's being taken care of because we're paying attention to what he cares about. And the brand and the retailers get that upside because they deliver that offer to him versus not doing anything at all. So longer term, we want to go and solve those problems and help people personalize their pricing.
Which of the marketing opportunities or the business opportunities is larger, with the brands or with the retailers, or is it really is an opportunity have a mix to it?
It's a mix.
Okay.
Yeah. You need both sides of the coin to be effective writ large, to go and implement kind of the vision that we have. But there's a large enough market share within the retailers and the brands, and different enough use cases where there are some of our competitors just do one or the other. But our vision is to really have a true end-to-end platform that solves all of those use cases. And most retailers and brands at this point are tired of working with 20, 30, 40 different vendors. So we're trying to really be that true strategic pricing partner that helps meet the majority of their use cases.
Wow. So let's talk about this growth strategy. This is interesting to me that you're in how many countries now? 100?
Yeah, we have customers in 183 countries. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a lot of customers.
Yeah.
How do you acquire a customer? Is that salespeople?
Yeah, we have it's a couple of channels. So one is our direct model. So we've got a sales team and a pre-sales team together to go and do some outbound and help customers understand, hey, this is what others are doing. This is how we can help you. And they just do some more scoping to help them see how we can solve those value propositions. Then separately, we get inbound. So pricing is an interesting industry. It's a very small industry. There are hundreds of like true grocery pricing professionals, for example, in the US. If you go globally, then obviously it's a bigger number, but I'm just using that as an example. It's not a big group, right? So you kind of end up building up a reputation, and you end up getting pulled into other retailers as your customers go in and start changing jobs. So that happens a lot for us too.
Okay. Is there now, in terms of building this international sales strategy, are you licensing the opportunity in other countries to other businesses, or it's your people on the ground or
it's
on
our
the
folks.
phone?
Yeah, it's our folks. Yeah.
Wow, it's all direct. Okay.
Yeah. We've got some really strong go-to-market commercial team members in London, in Albania, Tirana, and then we've got a strong development team in Copenhagen as well. So that group was part of the group we acquired in the US and Canada. We're in Davis, we're in San Diego and Arizona. But yeah, it's all internal. We do have some partnerships though. So we do have some good partners with like Nielsen's a company out there that you might have heard of, like a market measurement company. They're a good partner of ours. We, help customers together. Oftentimes, sometimes they'll bring us in, sometimes vice versa. We've got other companies like Price Advantage who help, fuel companies. And so we help them by managing, more of the competitive pricing angles of what they do. So we do get some good traction in business there, and we're working on building out our alliance of pricing partners as we go.
Okay. So thinking about the longer term vision, I mean, you're based here out of the Sacramento region, out of Davis.
Yeah.
How big is this company going to get? What do you really envision it, and what are you going to do with it ultimately?
Yeah. So we're about 300 people now, and pricing is the most powerful lever on any P&L. So you can go really deep, and you can influence a lot of dollars and a lot of, gross profits by helping customers and companies manage that more effectively. So as we step into the trade promotion optimization path, I was describing the $100 billion US spend and $1 trillion global spend, we can actually, the sky's the limit if you do it right. Then there are other use cases you can solve for as well. But we're very focused on pricing. We see an opportunity to continue growing at the rate we've been growing, and thankfully our investors believe in us. And so, they've been participating in subsequent rounds of financing because they see it's a big total addressable market. They see our momentum's been good, and they see that we are eager to innovate. And a lot of our competitors in the space just haven't been investing in R&D at all.
How fast are you guys growing? I know you've been on the Inc. 5000 a bunch of times, right?
A
few times.
Yeah. I mean, I think year over year, last year, we were around 90% growth.
Wow.
Yeah.
With 300 employees, right?
That was on revenue. Sorry, on a revenue basis.
Yeah, but
50% on employees. Yeah.
Wow. Just a company that size growing that fast, that's really staggering growth. It's really impressive. Okay, so you come in as business development person, and you believe. How did you become the CEO?
Our founders built a really great culture around meritocracy, and there was always a point of view of, hey, if you want more responsibility and you can take on more responsibility, we're going to give you that opportunity. So because they created that environment, a lot of us at the company have been here I joined 10 years ago, which is kind of crazy for me to think about, but we've had a lot of people who've been there longer than me even, from before when I joined. And we've had people who've been there who joined right around my time who are still there, who are still there. And so because of that culture, I think people have really appreciated that, hey, this is a place where I'm getting stretched every week, outside of my comfort zone. And so as a result, people stay, and I stayed. When I joined, I thought I was going to be here for 2 or 3 years. I thought I was going to be out after that point. I was like, going to come in, pick up some experience, help grow this thing, and move on to the next thing. Because remember, I just wanted to be a consultant at the time. Again, here I am 10 years later. And I think the reason I got to where I am now is because of that environment that the founders built. And because the founders recognized, hey, here's someone who cares a lot about the company, lives it every day. And they trusted me to, take over as the COO, then the CEO role, because that would then allow them to focus more on the product innovation, R&D. And so,
interesting.
Yeah.
You started 10 years ago, roughly. How many employees did you have then?
We were, at our lowest count, we were like 7 employees.
Okay. So it's grown a lot underneath you coming into business development, and it grows around you. So in terms of any lessons there, in terms of obviously building the company culture that way, but in terms of somebody like yourself, starting with a high growth startup. I'm an employee with a high growth startup. Any words of wisdom on how to approach that opportunity? Because it might be more of an opportunity than what you realize.
Yeah. I think a lot of people look at opportunities in kind of a static way, where they're like, hey, and in a binary way, like, this is the offer at the company, right? Compensation, package, structure, role, title. And if you step back and if you look at it, well, what could this become? And if you do the due diligence to understand what are their gaps, strengths, weaknesses, do they have the kind of culture that promotes people who want to make an impact or not? And you look at it a little more broadly, then I think that could lead to an interesting outcome versus just ruling things out based on looking at a static package or something at a point in time. When I first joined, I took a compensation package that was half of what would have been offered in the Bay Area, for example. Nonetheless, it was exciting. I was excited about the equity opportunity, and it really did seem like a place where both I would learn a lot, but also that I could contribute a lot, because they just badly needed help in some areas that I enjoyed. So I think the advice I would give is be open-minded and do enough due diligence to evaluate whether, that startup and that opportunity can actually help be an accelerator towards your career, or whether it truly is just a static thing that you should move away from.
A lot of companies, obviously you've had this really incredible growth, but a lot of companies, they end up having this stall out period when they first start, right? You start and you're trying to break through and get it proven and get enough traction where it starts, you're able to throw some more fuel on the fire. Did you start before that moment or during that moment?
No, we had that for sure as well.
Okay, you were kind of in that figuring it out mode at the beginning when you first started.
Yeah, the first 2.5, 3 years that I was there, we had a completely different business model, actually. And it was a great business model, by the way, but it was a B2C model. And so we had some good traction there as well. And actually, we had our financing fall apart at the last moment. We were about to go raise some money, finally, for the first time with outside funding in a formal way. And then at the very last minute, it fell apart. And so we actually had a board directive to shut the company down in 2015. And a group of us, because the financing fell apart, and so, but a group of us came together, and everyone who was in this group actually is still with the company. But a group of us came together in 2015, and we came up with a plan. We presented it to the board. They approved it, and so we did a pivot, and that was the hardest thing I think any of us ever had to do, because I mentioned, when you asked me how big were we when we started, we were actually 65 people when we started. But then we had to cut down to 7 people during that pivot. You raised
a bunch of money and didn't turn it into a strong enough business, and so you had to pivot. And during that pivot time was probably painful.
It was the most painful part. Yeah, it was the most challenging experience of my life, but also maybe the most rewarding in some sense. In hindsight, it didn't feel like that at the time. But we went from 65 people building a B2C company where we had a shopping app. We had tens of thousands of customers on it. It was going well in that regard, but didn't work out. Pivoted that group of 7. We changed it to a B2B model, got our first customers, and started rebuilding the company from there. And again, that same group of people are all still here. And we thankfully, our board believed in us, and the early Moneta Ventures out of Sacramento, they were our first, to come and put a term sheet in front of us once we did the pivot. Mm-hmm. And they've believed in us and are still an investor and have supported us as we've gone.
And I think that's why, sorry to interrupt you. That's what, I didn't even know about you guys. I'm an investor into Moneta, so I probably saw the name as I see the, so I guess I have a small, very small stake in your outcome. But then I saw you come across a story about you in the Business Journal. And then I saw Moneta Ventures. I'm like, oh, shoot, I should, reach out and see what this is. I didn't know you were 300 employees. I didn't know any of this stuff, which, I'm glad we're invested into you.
Thank you.
And I'm glad Moneta invested into a local company. To me, that's an interesting thing and that's what I'm about, is relentlessly local and how to share stories of winning here in, our region. So it inspires other people to do it. And I think when people hear a story like we got a directive from the board to shut down, and you disregarded that, or you decided to come in with a different game plan and you sold that to them. Okay, walk me through that a little bit in terms of sound. If it was difficult, what did it feel like?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you looked at the business model that we had, it was clear that the responsible thing to do was to shut down the company at the time, just because there wasn't a path forward. So they made the right call in that regard. But then we came back and said, but you know what? we've got some really good technology here. Like we're aggregating, collecting a lot of data. We're doing some really cool things with it. We have the background where we know how to think about and work with pricing. So we went into a room. It was probably, when you get some of the worst news of your life, right? That what you've been putting your blood, sweat, and tears into for years has to go shut down. And it's good to keep your mind busy and have something else to work on. So it was like, we have nothing to lose by giving this a shot. So a couple of us went to the Black Bear Diner in Sacramento at some point. Like we're there as long as we could stay until they kicked us out, worked on a plan, took it back to the office, kept working on it. And then we went and pitched it to the board with the founder support. And, thankfully they were supportive because they saw, okay, here's a path and here's a way that we can actually have some chance of, keeping the company alive, but also returning some proceeds to those who have put money in. Mm-hmm. And it turned from a situation of let's just figure something out to keep it alive to a growth story, which we're really fortunate about. So eternally grateful to the team that stuck through it. And we even have some examples of people who we had to, part ways with during that pivot, who continued helping us and supporting us even without any compensation. We were able to hire some of them back too.
That's cool.
So we got some hardcore people who care.
That must have been tough. If it was tough on you and you're one of the leaders that stayed and put the plan together, the people that got let go, that must have been pretty devastating.
Yeah, it was terrible. One of the benefits to it was that they all understood it was out of anyone's hands. So everyone came at it with a lot of support.
Any advice on that piece in terms of like was there like extra communication? How did you make sure that you preserved all those relationships?
I think that because when we got the board directive, we were very transparent with the rest of the company and saying like, hey, the board told us to shut this down and we're going to do whatever we can to help you, but start looking elsewhere. Mm-hmm. Everyone was approaching what we then did after that from a perspective of this is a way of continuing what we've been working towards. So everyone was actually pretty grateful. So it wasn't that hard of a sell in that regard, but it still wasn't easy to go back and have the conversation with everybody and say, hey, as much as we wish we had room for you on this based on, the situation, we only have so many slots available. So, sorry, but let's stay in touch and see how we can, bring you back in the future. And we were able to do that for quite a few people. And others moved on and are doing great right now.
That's great.
Yeah.
So now let's fast forward to today. Now you're doing really well, and the sky's the limit. Interesting environment that we're in today with banks having difficulty and a lot of uncertainty. There's unrest, uncertainty within people trying to raise money from the startup community. Yeah. How are you navigating that, or is that really doesn't affect you at this time?
Yeah, I feel very bad for everyone who just was subject to poor timing, right? I think a lot of companies were probably in the fundraising process when all the funds dried up. I'm going back to even before the whole banking situation. And it just kind of goes to show that entrepreneurship, startups, a lot of it is, preparations when luck meets opportunity. A lot of it really does come down to that. There are probably some companies that had just raised big rounds at reasonable terms, and then others who were in the process of raising who really got challenged, right? And got the short end of the stick for no reason other than timing. So I feel very badly for those groups. In our case, because we raised our Series D in 2021, at the end of 2021, we raised that money with the but with one of the main objectives being like, hey, we're actually going to go and control our own destiny from here. And so we, the board, the investors all agreed that Engage3 get to a point where we wouldn't need additional financing post that. So we've largely, due to a combination of, luck meets preparation meets opportunity, all those things, we've not been subject to a lot of the extreme ups and downs as other companies have been. So we've been lucky, but it could have been a different way,
So now you're not needing to raise more money. That means you're making some money, and that's a good feeling. A lot of startups, in terms of that, it's interesting because in dealing in this world, there's how much to reinvest into the company for growth and not worry about profitability. And then, kind of the decision of, well, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. We better trim things up or quit investing into growth, however you want to look at it. And let's make sure we're making some money. Any thoughts on that in terms of how startups should view that right now in this environment?
Yeah. I think
get profitable no matter what, if you can.
The more that you can not be pigeonholed into like needing outside help, the better, right? If you lose all leverage by having no cash runway and you're going out to market to get funds, it's just challenging. It's unfortunate. And no one necessarily means to take advantage, but on the other hand, everyone, knows when you're negotiating what your respective positions are, right? So I think my advice in general to startups who are, looking between those two things would be, how can you seize control of your own destiny and manage to the more conservative model and approach where you don't necessarily need that outside help? Because if you do that, then people will actually be rushing to you to deploy their capital, right? If you can demonstrate you have that fortitude and that ability to go and manage it at that level. On the other hand, you have companies that just, there's no path to that, right? Because they're more of a longer term deep tech play or something like that. I guess the advice to that group is really make sure that you're not wasting your time talking to the wrong types of investors or partners. There are certain groups out there that actually look for opportunities like that are longer term deep plays, even in this environment. So if you can't go and manage to extend your runway through other means, then just at least make sure you're spending your time in the right places.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to see mergers and things like that begin to happen?
Absolutely.
Some kind of consolidation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a buyer's market.
Yeah. Are you looking at things like that opportunistically right now?
Yeah.
Are there other people that could be additive to you?
I think
companies?
So. Yeah, I think so. There are a lot of good solutions out there that haven't been able to create any market penetration. And we have a large enough customer base now where we're looking to see what are some of the other pain points our customers have that we can go and solve through new technology, or that, bringing in a new team that we might, acquihire could bring to the table. Yeah. So that's definitely,
I would think that there'd be a lot of IP out there and a lot of just valuable stuff, maybe valuable talent. And hey, I'd just come join you guys and bring the solution, right? To stay afloat, even if maybe, no cash out of pocket type mentality, a little bit of equity. I can just see those kind of deals beginning to happen. As a growth factor. We have a venture fund, and so we're making investments into companies a lot earlier stage than you. And so these questions are sort of cropping up now with our portfolio, and where people are going to see opportunity is beginning to become. I won't say it's becoming more clear, but it's becoming top of mind in terms of this.
Are you seeing that at the earlier stages? People are looking more at kind of sell side.
Well, you know what? I can't say that I'm seeing that as a trend. Yeah. I can see that it's all over the board. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's a general trend to being more conservative and approaching, realizing that it's been a little frothy out there and it's not going to be frothy for a while. Mm. And that means a little bit different behavior, different way of managing your resources.
Yeah. Yeah. So. And to your point, when we acquired Dexy last year, we brought a whole new set of capabilities to the table, and we brought great people and leaders and processes into the company. And it was like a decision that we never looked back from. And so, I think looking at that, right, when you find a fit that works, I don't know the exact statistic, but something like 7 out of 10 or 8 out of 10 acquisitions fail. When you do find one that works and fits, then you learn a lot from it, and you kind of get excited about, well, what are the opportunities out there to continue, finding the right technology IP, to your point, or the right people to bring in and help grow you even faster. So,
all right, well, I'll ask you about that. I only got a little bit more time left, but I want to make sure I get these questions because you're teeing it up really well. Okay, in terms of acquiring, a lot of times there's indigestion. What happened with your acquisition? Why did it work, and what could have gone wrong?
I think what worked was that in both cases, there were a lot of people who just cared a lot about the company. And so we, both from a leadership perspective as well as, multiple levels down from senior leadership, there are people who had been with each respective company for a long time. And the reason I think that's important is you are going to run into bumps, and you are going to run into challenges and issues. And you're going to need people who are willing to just get in there and figure it out, right? And not wait around for someone else to solve the problem. And that came up again and again and again, right? Where things that were not anticipated came up and would have become otherwise a big issue. But hey, someone, who'd been with the company for quite some time, but wasn't necessarily in a senior role, went and solved the problem by banding together with a couple of people across the company. There are a lot of examples of that. And so I think if you do the due diligence to kind of go and figure out what is the culture of the people like in whatever way that you can, and dig deeper, then, you'll be more successful. We didn't quite do all that level of due diligence, but we did at some level, but we got lucky and fortunate that those people were there.
That's great. Yeah. That fit, it's amazing how I've dealt with some of these acquisitions that have been, I've seen the culture, I've seen the opposite of that where nobody gets along. It's us and them.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you get any of the synergies out of the deal if people won't even work together to bring the thing together? So good for you. Well, I think I look at it as everything's a leadership issue. So your leadership as a CEO helped make that happen. You had built an environment that was inclusive, and you found a group of people that wanted to work that same way. And so maybe luck, preparation, one of those preparation opportunity things happen for you as well.
And on the flip side, anything that went wrong is my fault too, right? So
isn't that how it goes? Yeah. So CEO lessons. So I think it's interesting. Another thing is going from business development to CEO of a 300-person company. So as a new CEO, what have you learned?
Yeah. I used to think that I already felt like it was my company. I mean, as someone who's always a shareholder, as you know, we all got equity coming into the company. I always felt like it was my company, and I always felt like there's no way I could feel even more ownership to the success or failures of the company. But once I did get in the role, I did feel that shift, and managing that in a way where you stay mentally healthy and don't stress yourself out and worry about things you can't control, I think was probably a big challenge and lesson initially. Within 1 week of becoming CEO, that's when COVID hit. So my game plan went out the window immediately. And so having the support system around me was critical, both in terms of the team members who I, grew up with around me, as well as the board, as well as other mentors and advisors I've had. So I think having people around who you knew that you could go to and ask for help was great. I think figuring out ways to manage your mental health as you go through those kinds of evolutions is important. And then I think that having the right people around you in the trenches too is probably the next critical thing. And so again, thankfully, everyone who's been with both Engage3 and Dex, the company we acquired, a lot of those folks have been there for a long time and have cared a lot. And it makes your job a little easier and doesn't make you feel so alone.
What about mental health? How do you keep because obviously being the CEO of any company has got a stress factor. Going through COVID's got a stress factor. Going through high growth is a stress factor. So I get the in the trenches piece, but what about like you got a life other than that? I mean, how do you keep it all straight?
I think there's a direct correlation between my productivity and my mood and like when I last got out and got some exercise. Yes. And then as I've gotten old, I used to think I was a superhero because I could live off of 3 or 4 hours of sleep, and like superhero in the sense that like, that's fine. That's okay. That's all I need. And as I got older, that became unsustainable as well. So taking care of myself and being more explicit about sleep, and then being able to talk to people around me and ask for help. So what's nice is that we have a leadership team where if something is challenging or problematic, rather than just bottling it up and like trying to, deal with it on your own, like you just put the issues out there and people start helping you think through it. Yeah. And that's actually an exercise you have to keep reminding yourself. Don't try to solve the problems yourself. Bring them back up, bring them back to the right people, get help. So I think getting help and all the other things I mentioned have been kind of critical to that.
You said exercise though, in terms of getting a workout in.
Yeah.
That's like as a stress relief.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you do?
And I used to play a lot of soccer before COVID. Okay. I used to play like 4 games a week.
Oh, wow.
On like
you probably got great cardio.
It was great. But I haven't picked that back up since then. So now I picked up tennis during COVID. One of my cousins taught me how to play tennis, and now I'm obsessed with it. So tennis, basketball, soccer, anything like that I can do.
You like playing sports as part of your outlet.
If I can, yeah.
Okay, so you talked about Sacramento, and I'll just kind of wrap up for the last subject is like Sacramento invested into a Sacramento company, and you've seen it. You're the founders of your company have seen it change from, as you described at the beginning, you better leave Sacramento in order to, really grow a high growth startup. You got to leave Sacramento. You've seen it change. Yeah. It's been a little bit of an evolution. You haven't been here the whole time, but what have you seen in terms of change over the last 10 years? And what would your founders say in terms of their belief in the Sacramento region and where we're going?
Yeah. At the scale that we were at when I first joined, in addition to business development, I was doing recruiting, marketing, all kinds of stuff. But because I was our main recruiter, I was talking to all the candidates. And one of the things that's changed is the sophistication of people around startups and equity. So before, nobody even really knew what equity was when I first joined. I was talking about it was a very small group that like knew what it was or paid attention to it. now there's more knowledge around it and more of an appetite for it, which is cool. So I'd say that's
within the employee base. They're like, oh yeah, give me a piece of the startup, and I could see my net worth go up.
Yeah, within the broader talent pool, there's like a desire for more of that ownership. I think that was really.
And
cool.
you think there's a desire? Sorry for interrupting you, but the desire is people want the equity over the I don't know, salary. Is it?
Not necessarily, but just the fact that like the savvy went up and people really started understanding startups more and like knowing more about the kind of core metrics of startups, right? Like just as we've gone and as we've scaled, we've noticed that we were beginning to see more and more people directly apply to us, partially maybe because we started becoming bigger and, you know, had more different types of roles. But I think part of it was just that more people were starting to look for startups and look for tech companies where they can go and do that kind of thing. And that wasn't necessarily the case in Sacramento in 2013 when I first joined.
I think probably too for founders, what I've seen too in terms of, you know, I built some security camera companies, and I would have never thought about bringing in investor capital or given all the employees as part of it just didn't cross my mind in terms of stock options and all that. It wasn't as much of a thing as I was building my businesses. Now, as an investor, I want you to give your employees stock options. I would expect that. If you're not, I'm not sure that you've got the right mentality to grow a company.
Right.
It's kind of interesting how it has changed. The world has changed. But in terms of Sacramento, sorry to interrupt you, Beck, how have you seen Sacramento change besides just more aware?
Yeah. I would say the fact that there are fundraising avenues here now when there weren't quite before is a huge difference. So you might laugh at this. And I've told this story a couple times before, but when we were fundraising back when we were a B2C company and I was meeting with different companies in the Bay Area, Palo Alto, we got far enough, well, putting that aside, even early on into those conversations, some of them would say, if I can't bike ride into your office, I'm not interested in investing. And to hear that just was so shocking to me, right? To see like that was kind of the mentality at that point. So it was such a breath of fresh air to meet a group like Moneta Ventures, right? And I'm plugging them a little bit too much perhaps here, but that was great, right? I think they've been an early, part of creating a culture of supporting companies and saying, hey, you can actually start here and you can actually continue to grow here. I think previously when at UC Davis, it always felt like there's a bit of a brain drain around entrepreneurship specifically. And now there are opportunities around, right? If you are interested in startups,
when you say brain drain, people graduate and leave to go somewhere else. Yeah.
And some people go to Sacramento, but it felt largely that people go to other parts of California or other states. And I feel like, I don't have the statistics on this. I'd be curious to go get them, but I feel like that has probably significantly shifted. And I feel like there's probably a meaningful amount of people who either are now starting companies in this area or joining companies in this area when they previously would have, gone elsewhere. So I think just having more fundraising opportunities, more job opportunities. One of the programs I started with the UC Davis program, the MBA program, was creating an internship program between the university students and local startups. And that was one of the first ways that we were tying companies and undergraduates together. Because
you started that?
I did that in partnership with Andy Hargadon at the UC Davis MBA program. And so we created that, and it got, brought into the GSM, the Graduate School of Management there. But prior to that, like if you were an undergraduate, like there was not really a way to access it. But if you went to UC Berkeley or went to these other universities, they had a lot of infrastructure around that. So I think now we have that infrastructure. If you go look at UC Davis and Sac State, there are entrepreneurship programs. There's the Plasma program. There's the, UC Davis Big Bang competitions. There's a lot going on now.
Yeah, it's cool. And I think COVID was, we benefited from COVID in terms of venture capital, seeking other areas outside the Silicon Valley and San Francisco. I think everybody with COVID started getting on Zoom, and you started building relationships over, without having to ride your bike over there.
Yeah.
you could make an investment, maybe even without ever shaking their hand directly. I've saw some of that kind of stuff happening, which is interesting to me that happened while we were starting the Growth Factory, which is our focus is relentlessly local. Let's get some seed money into the early startups so that they can get funded by Moneta or maybe venture capital from outside the region. But overall, we attract more venture dollars into the region, and it helps the economy. And hopefully we can create an advantage here by clustering this whole effort. And it feels like it's working, but I know we're the beneficiary of people like you having this success and people beginning to believe that it's possible to do it here.
When I pulled my car up and I got into the parking lot, it's my first time here, and I turned around and looked at the building, I was shocked that this building exists. I've heard a lot about Growth Factory. I've heard a lot of great things, but to see this infrastructure exist is super exciting to me because it wasn't there before. So I'm looking forward to learning more, actually.
We're super excited about what's going on, and you're one of these inspirational stories that I think makes other people recalibrate their vision for their career and really maybe think a little bit bigger. So that's where I take it. I think this is, obviously I'm really appreciative of the and admire this success, but I think there's people that are the up and comers that are like, oh my gosh, this guy can do it. Maybe I can do it too.
That's kind of you to say, and they absolutely can.
I love it. Yeah. All right, so I'll let you have the last word. Closing thoughts to maybe those people out there that are thinking, look, I'm somebody who has aspirations of being a high growth startup CEO. How should I be thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I think where a lot of people get stuck is in questioning whether or not they can do it, and going through all the different kinds of scenarios and overthinking it. And I think what has always worked best is just getting out there and doing it. What's like the smallest thing I can do to get some validation of my idea, right? And just get out there and do it. Talk to a customer. Don't wait till you have all the products or don't feel like you have to have anything incredibly organized. Just get out there and talk to the end user that you want to sell to, and you're going to learn a lot. So I think that is probably where I've seen a lot of the students that come out of things like the Plasma program or the other program. Like, that's the advice I continuously give.
Get out and talk to your customer.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You bet.
Yeah.
Thanks. Welcome back to the Mark Haney Show. Great conversation today with Edris Bemanian, the CEO of Engage3, a guy that took over the CEO role when it was needed. And basically they have sold their way out of the jam, if you will. They pivoted hard and figured out a way to win right here in Sacramento. And now they're in 180 plus countries and, just growing like crazy in this tumultuous time that we have in the economy right now, this time of uncertainty. For sure, Engage3 is figuring out a way to win. So thank you to Edris, and thank you to all you that are fighting the good fight for our freedom, our security, and our way of life. And of course, thank you to all those out there fighting the good fight for entrepreneurship. Here at the Growth Factory, here in the Mark Haney Show, here at Haney Biz, we're never above you, never below you, always by your side.
Thanks for watching today's show. My goal for every episode is that you find a takeaway, something tangible you can use in your business today. And if you have a comment about a favorite takeaway, feel free to put it in the box below. And if you have a topic that you'd like me to bring up on the show, don't forget to let me know. And also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about entrepreneurship. Because at Haney Biz, we are always by your side.